Welcome to the 51st edition of Podcasters. Today with my dog and Harvey Castro, MD. Welcome, Harvey.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers.
My name is Dr. Harvey Castro. I'm a ER board certified physician with over 20 years of experience. And I've basically been switching out of the front lines and working with the C-suite and AI healthcare. And actually, that's how we met. So I'm really excited.
I'm excited too because what we see is this is a whole new area where there's a lot of pros and cons. There's a lot of people who think they know how it works, or and they see the risk or they don't see the risk. And I imagine when you're talking to C-suite people, they don't know much. I'll say it nicely. That's my experience. And people also think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that AI can solve anything, and it's always right. And it makes everything cheaper, right? You hear these things too?
Oh yeah, all the time.
So here's my question. You come from basically an ER situation where it's high pressure, taking swift decisions, talking about life and death decisions. One mistake could, basically, screw up someone's life for good. It could be an invalid or whatever, or you could save someone's life or limb or whatever, and make, well, you make the difference anyway, but a great difference. What drove you to move to, because I think it's quite impactful, to move from the front line, which is heavy duty, also emotionally, I can imagine, to C-suite and AI. What happened?
I think my brain is, my wife always tells me I have this octopus brain. My brain's all over the place. And the more and more I spent time in the front lines, the more I realized, man, the system is broken. We need to make changes. And it just can't be anybody making those changes. We need healthcare providers with real frontline experience to make those changes. And so I started thinking, I think I'd be better serving physicians and patients by being in the C-suite so that I can say firsthand, look, this is what's going on, these are the problems, and fix it with a dual brain and now a trio brain where I'm looking at it as an entrepreneur, business owner, but then I'm also looking at it as a physician, and I'm also looking at it with AI eyes. And so when you put those three together, I'm able to look at things with just a different filter. And I think it's really helpful in the healthcare world.
And if I look at these things with a different filter, then my brain goes from, okay, what do you see?
Well, from the front lines, I see, obviously, specific in the emergency room, I'll give some examples. Number one, patients can relate all over the world. They have to wait, unfortunately. They have to wait a long time. In some places, unfortunately, some people die in the emergency room, in the
Seriously?
waiting room, not even being able to see a physician or a healthcare provider. So my thing is, why not use technology to help that? Now, then we start looking at HIPAA and the GDPR and privacy and how to do that. And I think that's where having that, knowing the rules of the game per se, how to change things. And so looking at it now with AI eyes, there are ways of facilitating. Just to give you some really abstract ideas, some exist and some don't, but this camera that we're using, if you were to put this in the waiting room, immediately as people are waiting, it would be able to tell you their blood pressure, their hemoglobin A1C. There's so many information just with the simple camera. Now, when they come in and check in, their voice can also give a lot of information, and all this data can be acquired, even down to the person walking. And so depending how they're walking, you can also get more data for their health. And so fast forward, if we're able to channel all these things and technology, I know I worked at a busy county hospital where they had a kiosk where you would kind of touch through and help you triage, and it would tell you, hey, you need to go to the ER, and you were right there, or you need to go to urgent care. And so using technology, now we're able to see more patients quicker. And now, obviously, with telemedicine, there's a possibility of some patients not having to come to the ER, and not that legally we can't discourage people from coming to the ER, but if we can take care of them before they get to the ER and really take care of them, then we can save them money. One quick example, I've seen patients unfortunately show up at an urgent care, and the urgent care knows they can't take care of it, but they still see them. I feel like they take their money, and then they're like, okay, now we're going to send you to the ER, and I'm like, you knew from the minute they walked in that they really needed to go to the ER, and then vice versa. People go to the ER, and the ER doctor knows, you know what, this can save you some money. Why don't you go to the urgent care? And now hospitals are literally setting up what's called a fast track, so you're not really in the ER, you're in a different part of the same ER, but now it's you're charged as an urgent care. And I think those are the things we need to do to help our patients.
So what I envision, if you say that next time you go to an ER or an hospital for treatment, there's like this triage tunnel where you walk through a tunnel where there's like 5 stations. First of all, you have to walk somewhere, camera records it, then you need to talk to a bot, and it tells you, please repeat this text, and then please stand still while we monitor your face, and we have your blood pressure and what have you, or your saturation, I don't know. So if you think about it, that wouldn't that be a great thing if everybody who goes to a hospital, no matter which doctor, does that, whether it's urgent care or not, and you create a set of data without having the person, maybe you identify as a number, and you link that data to that number. You create a data set that is so great that by the end of the tunnel, statistically, if someone needs to go left or right or straight to the morgue. That's the unfancy one, but those would be the consequences, right?
Yeah, and here's a big issue in the United States, and I'm sure you have it in your country as well. The average age of a nurse in the United States is 54, with 20% of that average coming from nurses that are 65 and over. And so if you think about that number, fast forward 10 years, the average age would be 64 of a nurse, and most of those 20% of those nurses, if they stayed, would be over 74. And so we can't have that in our workforce. And if we don't do something to help our healthcare force, we're going to get people to burn out quicker. Healthcare providers to say, you know what, I'm done with this, I'm out, and all these professionals making this problem even worse. And so one of the things that I've been toying around with, and I've been saying, and I know some of my colleagues think I'm crazy for saying this, but I do see a future where I'm not picking stocks. I don't have any ownership in OpenAI, but OpenAI has invested in robots, and they're invested in another company that this year they will be coming out with robots. And I was thinking, well, they have the technology of a robot. They have the technology of ChatGPT 4, which as of late they have this thing called multimodality, which basically you can upload things, you can create text, you can make pictures. But here's my point. You put the eyes of the robot with ChatGPT 4, or the future will be 5 coming up here in 6 months ish. And now this robot can really be an assistant to the doctor or the nurse, or for physical labor, help you lift the patient or assist the patient. And so now I think this technology is going to be huge in healthcare. Now, I haven't seen anything announced like that, but I'm just looking at all the pieces and I'm like, we're pretty much there. It's just a matter of creating it and do the reinforced learning as far as the algorithm for it to be placed in healthcare.
That's also a bit of a scary thought that one company would rule that. And it's the same. I don't know if you followed that. Epic.
Yes.
Of course, it's a very useful and great program. But the scary part is they're connecting to ChatGPT, and what is going to happen to all that patient data? And everybody can give all the guarantees in the world, but we know that mistakes happen. And the conclusion would be that all the patient data goes everywhere, and your personal data is being used to train OpenAI or ChatGPT, for that matter. That's one thing. And how do you view Epic connecting to OpenAI, and at some point maybe going over all the patient data, compare it to other ones, and having inherent biases in it? Because let's say if you go to Holland or Europe, there's the biggest part of the population has a certain origin. I'm trying to do this politically correct. And the point is, all that data, for instance, men and women, we know in cardiology, now we know there's a difference between a physiological difference between men and women, the way you treat, the way you diagnose, the way you give medicine, right? Am I correct? With cardiac problems. So now we know that. And so if you have more men than women in your system, then you have an inherent bias in your data. Now, if predominantly, let's say, men, as an assumption, would go to the doctor and women wouldn't go, then we know that if a woman comes in, they'll be treated wrong. The diagnosis will be wrong because the inherent bias in the data is men, right? And we know there's a lot of groups in the population, if you go to Africa or Asia, that are not in that data or not sufficiently to be relevant. How do you view that? I think it's scary, but how do you view that?
Excellent points. I put a lot of thought into this particular issue.
For the
I
viewers,
see
we
it
didn't
several
practice this one, right? This sort of popped up.
No, no, this is right off the, this is just right off the cuff that you just asked me. But this is something that comes up, the biases in the algorithm, and how can that hurt our patients? And here's my answer back, and I haven't seen this anywhere else, but this is my thoughts. I think twofold. Number one, we need to obviously have data that represents the population of your, let's just say, country. And so if OpenAI has created this data that's supposed to be, huge and whatnot, but it's mostly from the United States, then it makes no sense to use that same platform for other countries. It makes more sense, in my opinion, to create your own data set and use your own data. And there's this fancy scientific term called federated learning. And basically what it is we just create the data, let's say, from your country, and we represent that. And then here's the beauty. In your country, there's different areas, and some parts of your country may be different from another part. So then even more dissection and more information for that particular data. And so what I envision is twofold. I'm 100% with you in that this information is very sensitive, and you're going by someone's word that's saying, oh, no, we're not training our models. This is, we're going to sign off that's saying that this is secure, but there's no way of validating that. There's no way of truly knowing that your data is 100% secure. Plus, once you put it in the cloud, it's literally in a cloud. So someone smart out there will be able to figure out how to hack into that cloud. And so one of the things that I'm personally working with different hospital systems around the world is, how can I create a data set using your own data? And just to dissect it out, we would use something like Llama, that's an open source, but then we would put it inside your hospital servers, inside your own system, and then train it with your own data. But then it would be under your secure servers, under your control, and it would never leave your system. And so to me, that makes more sense, because now we're giving healthcare to the right person using the right data. And then each hospital will still have limitations where, like you said, maybe certain populations show up to the hospital more than other. And then unfortunately, that's just a data issue that has to be known. And so to that, I say we need to have kind of like a food label, so that when you use each data set, you look at this label that says, okay, here are the list of bias. Here's the problems with the data set. And so me as a doctor, I can look at it and say, okay, when I make these decisions, I know that when this gives me an output, I know these are the bias. These are the issues. And so then obviously with my 20 years of clinician history, I should be able to say, okay, yeah, clinically this makes sense. I see this new data. I may use part of it. I may not use it. I may just reject it. But then that's where I feel like the human being comes, that clinical gestalt of all these years. Now, I'm personally more worried about, no offense
you're
to
getting
the young
European on
guys.
me.
I'm more worried about the young guys. Unfortunately, I see my kids all addicted to the technology, and I think, man, yesterday my son was taking a test, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm using ChatGPT to help me and understand and that," and I'm like, "Oh, I need your brain to do this. I need you to do it, and then supplement with ChatGPT, but don't start with ChatGPT. You come up with your ideas, then you start having that brainstorming session." So that's my 2 cents on that one. Sorry, that was long.
No, it's actually very insightful, because what I see happening, what you're, the point you're making about actually your brain doing shit, or doing stuff, thinking, Um, that is part of the problem of training doctors in the future. I don't know how it is in the States, in Europe, or especially in Holland. Doctors are being trained in, I don't know, within a box. We have procedures, we have protocols, and if someone doesn't fit in protocol, now already a lot of the times the doctors don't know what to do. And in your ER, as an ER doctor, you have to know so much of everything because you have no idea what comes in first, and you have to decide which you're the ultimate triage specialist, but so fast you otherwise you can't save lives. So here's the thing: most doctors, specialists, of course they're well-trained doctors and they're smart people, but the system teaches them to think in protocols, and once you start thinking in protocols, you stop thinking. I'm sorry to say. My mom is diabetic, but a very unstable one. So if she goes into the hospital, she knows what to do. But the doctors say, "Oh, we need to follow protocol." But we've tried to explain to doctors, if that happens, you kill her. It doesn't work. And the lines of defense you have to push through in order not to have them medicate her in a certain way, knowing that would kill her, because it's not in protocol. And it's really complicated. So that will become worse with if you introduce AI, not in the proper way in the training of doctors. I would assume you could use AI to present cases, very complicated cases, to force them to think outside of the box and understand what they're looking at, or you know what I mean? So you create more learning experience.
Yeah, no, that's very insightful. I see these protocols, to just break it down to basic terms, as a bell curve. These protocols are there because it's supposed to help, majority of the population. The problem is when people come in that are not just general population, and they actually need certain different treatments and have different effects for medicine. We all of us are individual, and I'm going to defend AI in that, because we can put in our whole human genome and create more information for the AI. Now I can personalize medicine for that individual, and now I can take them out of the quote, what you just mentioned, the guidelines, and make their own guidelines for that person, for that population, specific. If it's male, female, and to their race, which I think would be even better medicine. I know we're not there yet.
It's a touchy point, right? If we say about race, but the fact of the matter, it's true. I'm Jewish, and there are certain genes that only in Ashkenazi Jews have, and it's a hereditary, and the population is not big enough to make it statistically relevant, but they need to research. So it's complicated.
Yes. And so to that, it would be nice. I've always said it'd be nice to have, my brain's going all over the place. It'd be nice to have different countries create their own data sets. Like, for example, to me, it makes no sense that if you don't speak English and you're trying to use ChatGPT, you're making two mistakes. One, you're translating or having ChatGPT translate. And if you don't know the language, you don't know if the translation's correct. So right there, you're going to have a bias. The other is what's called token size, just the amount of conversation that you're having with the computer, and you get so much words that you're allowed. Well, if you're using up your bandwidth with words to translate, now it's less. And so I'm seeing more and more that we really need to create our own models. We can still use ChatGPT to help you navigate, but when it comes to actually the data, we need to use yours. To your point, that's perfectly said. Certain races have certain genes, and those genes are very specific, and then unfortunately those have some medical conditions associated. But then if you compare it to the entire population, it's so little that some doctors either won't study it, won't look at it, or won't even consider it. But if you have a data set that's more specific to that population or that race, not that you're being racist in any way, you're giving that race the best care they need, and it's more specific, then to me, why not get researchers and people with deep pockets to really work on this data set to represent that population, and then give that algorithm out to those hospitals, so that way we can give the best care for those individuals.
You say people with deep pockets. I'm going to ask you a very difficult question.
There you go.
Because this is about no. It's an ethical question.
Okay.
Because should that part be not no? It's suggestive. Should it be not commercialized? Because I think my feeling is health care, and I know my father used to be he passed away, but he was a doctor, ENT, and he became a doctor because he wanted to help people, fundamentally help and cure people where possible, or make life easier. And I think most doctors, if you actually talk to them, it comes from within. Otherwise, you don't go through all the hardships to become a doctor. It's not only about money, unlike a lot of people would think. Having said that, so shouldn't these models be made available for free? And it shouldn't be, in my opinion, it shouldn't be a business model.
No, I agree with you. Let me rephrase or kind of explain. These algorithms are first expensive to maintain and expensive to move forward. So there are some costs associated. But let me preface with the angle that I'm thinking is the data itself. So before we even produce a product, we need data. Unfortunately, people are not, the governments out there are not putting money into research into certain populations. They're saying, well, the
Mhm.
bell curve is this. This is the majority of the population. We're going to study this
So we cover
population, but they're
90%
not.
and the rest suck on it.
Yeah,
Bad luck.
yeah, and so my point is, how do we fix that for to make it equal for everybody? Just because I'm 1% of the population doesn't mean I'm not any population. I am somebody. And so why not have, that's why I said maybe the solution that I came up with or just thought of is have someone with deep pockets to say, you know what, we are going to study this 1%. We
As
are
a
going to put
donor.
money into it. We're going to put research. We're going to donate all of this money so that we can create the data so that we can put it into the algorithm. Now, once we have the algorithm, I'm really, really excited about open source because obviously OpenAI is not open source, but something like Llama, because now you and I could literally, if you had the data, I could take Llama and we could put it together and we can create something. And here's what I've been telling startups around the world. Everyone's trying to make money off of this, but the key is to keep this as cheap as possible, keep your cost as low as possible, so that way it can be used. If you create this miracle algorithm to help a population, but then you put all this money and then you start trying to make 100x or 1000x, by the time it goes into the hospital, by the time someone actually has to use it, the hospital is going to say this is too expensive, we're not going to use it. So here's a miracle algorithm to help so many people, but because it's so expensive, it's not going to be used. And that to me is fraud. Like that's horrible. Like we're
It's like with
literally letting people
medication.
die because of money.
That's with the
Yeah.
medication,
And yeah,
with the patents.
yeah. And so as a doctor, I have a hard time when I see exchange of money because as a human being, I want us to help others. Just because you don't have money, I don't feel like it's right that technically you die sooner or you literally die depending what part of the country.
Or you're
And
very
so from an
unhappy.
ethical point of view, you know, I would love to see these algorithms helping people lower the cost, really giving great healthcare. I always say from an ethical point of view, and I do talks literally around the world, that I feel like the United States, unfortunately, will be the last to see a lot of these things in healthcare, like true innovation. Case in point, I always think, risk versus benefits. I feel like countries out in Africa, middle of nowhere, that have no healthcare, their government's going to say, you know what? I know this algorithm's not the best, but this is some kind of healthcare, and they're going to start thinking outside the box using AI to help their population. And they're going to have, I think, to some degree, better healthcare than some parts of the United States because of the way they're leveraging. I think that's going to happen.
I think you're probably right because, let's say in Africa, a lot of the people already get healthcare, like the banking system works through their phone. They don't have regular banking
Yeah.
system. Everything is phone based. So I wouldn't be surprised. Like in Morocco, they have for many years already have telemedicine. So these people who live in the mountains in these small villages, they have this little, I wouldn't say shack, but it's almost a shack. I visited a few where they actually have a computer with a camera, and there's a nurse that drives around all these villages. There's a cabinet with medicine in that shack behind the lock, and they make a connection with the regional clinic. There's a doctor, talks to the patient. If blood needs to be drawn or an injection needs to be given or medication or whatever, or a stethoscope, whatever, the nurse does it. The doctor gets the information, decides, okay, you need to go to the hospital, or we can do with the medicine. And it works like a charm. And a lot of people never
Well,
see a doctor in their life.
yeah.
Um, but they skipped the part in between. It's too costly because it's not densely populated. It's too costly to create clinics. A lot of people don't have transportation. So how are we going to do this? And I think they're actually doing a great job. I mean, it's getting better and better, but you know, they've come a long way. And that's the same story for the banking system. So I would imagine that AI sort of they skip the part in between and they go to, okay, hey, we have this model and I agree. Okay, it's not the best, but hey, the more we do with it, the better it gets. So in 10 years' time, we have this amazing model that sort of predicts, because I think you would go to predictive medicine. Because you just said something with the triage about the voice. There's this a niece of mine works for a company that they have a sort of an app where you talk to it every day, and you've created the baseline. And then these people have some sort of heart condition, and based on all the data, it can predict now 1 month in advance. 1 month, this is crazy, based on the voice of the person and the changes compared to the baseline, and with all these other people, and they know 1 month in advance if something cardiologically is going to happen, which this is specifically targeting, and they start treating 1 month ahead. And hey, these people don't get sick, so you get to preventive medicine. So I asked her, it's like, okay, if this works and this is true, and you have all these voices, are you guys going to do backward research in a few years' time to see, for instance, who got Parkinson's disease or ALS or something like that? Are you guys, or dementia? And are you guys going to use that data to predict, to backward engineer, to see if, based on the data, you could have predicted if someone could get or would get ALS or Parkinson or whatever a disease you could predict via the voice? And she said, well, interesting, we didn't think of that, but that's actually a very good idea. You need to have enough data and enough time. But yeah, and the longer you have it, the better it gets. And they're keeping all that data. So I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
God, this is truly amazing. Imagining every morning your phone tells you, or Siri says, hey, good morning. But just by saying good morning back and how are you, it knows. And it's like, oh, maybe you should go to the doctor today, but because that would be amazing.
Yeah. To your point, I had seen, I'm going blank on the name of the company, but I had seen a company that uses your voice to detect early Parkinson's disease and dementia. And so I've seen a company already working on that. I personally invested in another company, I forget, I think they're in Switzerland, that just with your voice, it could determine depression. And I've seen other companies do the same. So it's interesting how we're going into a different area now with AI and healthcare and these tools and the predictive analytics portion of it. I'm really excited about this. To take your example even further, Withings has a adapt this little adaption tool that goes on your toilet. It hasn't fully been released, but basically what it does is it looks at all your metabolites. So every time you use the restroom, it literally gives the doctor a whole algorithm of all the things that maybe minerals that you're low, hormones, and I thought, man, this is this is amazing because if you're it would give you early detection of certain diseases or that you're getting sick or you're recovering or certain medications that need to be adjusted. So I thought, man, this is huge. And then the last thing, I always want to add another kind of fun fact. We're now able to print our own medicines. And so when I give talks, one of the examples I say is, you know, combining everything we've had this conversation so far, why not? I wake up 2 in the morning, I pick up my phone, a doctor shows up, we start talking about my medical, I'm not feeling well, what's going on. That doctor is GPS located to the closest doctor to me in the closest emergency room, so they're pinged, and then they know what's going on. They say, hey, I need you to come to the hospital. They send a Tesla ambulance. It comes, I get in it, and then the camera's getting my blood pressure, everything we've talked about, and then say it says, okay, you need an aspirin. I see the doctor there. It literally starts printing my aspirin, and then I pick the pill, I take it, And then by the time I get there, I'm able to see the doctor, triage. The doctor knows who I am because we've been talking. If I speak another language, AI would be converting everything back and forth. So now I'm talking. When the doctor talks to me and says an American example, AI can convert it and put it in my ethical race and example and culture so that I'm like, oh, I know what he means. And so fast forward, I end up back home, everything's fine, and I go to the bathroom, and now the metabolites that I just talked about. And so all of these things that we're talking about, we have it. We just haven't taken it to the next level, and I think it's coming.
That is, there's two things that popped up when you said the restroom part. Because I was thinking about all these sports people that get unannounced visits from the doping, you call it.
Yeah.
It's enhancement medicine to check to draw their blood. What if you continuously analyze through the stool and the urine? Um, and the other thing I said, I thought to myself, okay, if someone uses drugs, if you're a pilot or whatever, it's like basically your stool tells you lock the door, you can't fly. You used cocaine or something else, or alcohol even, and it's sort of as positive as it is. And if you look at privacy, it's sort of a bit scary, isn't it?
Oh yeah. No, I agree, and that's where the whole HIPAA and GDPR come in, and it's that catch 22. We want to do the best for our patients, but at the same time, the last thing we want to do is create a hole where somebody now can invade our privacy and knows down to our intimate secrets because of our health. So it is a catch 22. I'm a positive thinker in the sense that I'm like, okay, let's trust, and I know that's a big word, let's trust the healthcare system to secure my data, but let's do it correctly. Let's do it together. Let's do it, blockchain technology has come and gone in a way, but let's consider using blockchain inside our healthcare system so that we can really lock these algorithms. Let me give you a quick example. This was kind of cool. You know, I saw this company. Again, I'm really bad with names, but what they did was amazing. It's say I wanted my human genome, and it's out there with 23andMe. We've all heard of stories where 23andMe gets hacked. It gets transferred. It gets hacked. Well, what they did is they do your blood, they put it immediately on blockchain, and then moving forward, if you want to share it with your doctor, it's a very specific bridge to it with blockchain. And now it's really tough for even them that that have the data for you. They can't even break into it. And so I thought, man, this is really smart. This is a way of securing my data, and it's how intimate is this? It's how I was made, like down to the molecule, my genetics. And so now it's super secure. Obviously, I'm sure, like everything, there's a way of hacking it, but you're really making it that much more difficult.
Yeah, but and I can imagine if you go to the next level and you would do such a thing, that you would put some sort of secondary uh, something in between. I don't know how to call it, where if someone requests to see or use your data, you get a request to say yes or no because you own the data. And if the doctor wants to see your data and he's just like, okay, there's no reason for it, just say no, you can't see it. And then he has to make a call to you. It's like, but I need the data because of X, Y, Z. You can still say yes. And if it's someone or some company or some whatever, you just, yeah, sorry, I'm blocking your access. You're not getting my data. I think it should be fully on the patient side, who you give access or not, or and you should be able to retrieve that access at any given time.
That made me think I'm kind of old. So back when I was in med school, there was someone famous that was in the hospital, and a lot of the med students logged into the computer because that famous person was there and went through their medical records. They didn't realize that the medical school, and this was over 20 years ago, they track every person that goes into every record. And then they were able to get the logins of every single one that went into that record. I had no business with that. They just wanted to know what happened. And so my point is, if that was 20 years ago, I know this stuff can be traced. But to your point, I haven't seen that. I don't know, ignorance, but I don't know if it's already there. But you're right. It would be nice to not only lock out your medical record, but just only give access to those that actually are in your care. And if I'm in your care today, but in the ER, but then say tomorrow I'm not, then really I shouldn't have access. So then maybe the next day I don't have access to you. If I want to know, I have to ask you for permission to see how you're doing. and then you can give me permission to say, yeah, you can look at my record and follow up with me. That's nice to you, but again, it's up to you.
Yeah, and then it's your data. You should own it, and you should decide. It was just a thought, and probably technology should be able. We're all connected. I can imagine that would be possible. Moving to the other side of it, to the patient side, because in one of the lectures I gave to neurologists, I said, imagine you're a patient, and we actually did the experiment, used data the doctors have on the patient. Basically, we took the file, I entered it in, I copied it and pasted it without any personal data, of course, in ChatGPT, the way a normal patient without any medical knowledge would do that. And I asked it to give me a couple of differential diagnoses based on XYZ. And in 4 to 5 cases within the 3 differential diagnoses, ChatGPT was actually correct and could explain it correctly why that would be a logical diagnosis. And those were actually quite complex diagnoses, quite complex cases. So these doctors were like blown away, except for the doctor who gave me the cases. He knew, of course. And the point was that we will see, and I don't know if you see it in your practice, but or in the hospitals, patients have access to their patient data. In Holland, at least, they can access their patient data, all the lab reports and everything. You can copy that and paste that in ChatGPT and ask questions about it and explain. And there's 2 things happening there. I think ChatGPT very often has more time and patience to actually explain. And it's not about ChatGPT, but generative AI. And you can have knowledge in every language, because that's the whole point, coming together and not thinking in protocols, because it's data. It doesn't care about protocols. You can give it a protocol, but that's a different thing. But if you think, it automatically thinks outside of the box. And here's the interesting thing. Patients are going to do that. And my assumption is that if the medical field, doctors are not starting to not control it, but contain it, it's going to increase the cost of medicine, because we're going to see stressed out patients, because ChatGPT within those 3 or 5 diagnoses, there's going to be some heavy stuff, right? That people think, yeah, I'm really, really, really sick. And the next question is, what test does the doctor need to do in order to understand if I actually have the disease? Then they get a whole list of tests. I think people are going to be in the ER or with the doctor asking, it's like, doctor, I need these tests because AI says I have one of these diseases. Could we do all of them? Yeah. And try to talk your way out of that.
So this brings to light a couple of things. Again, I'm going to date myself here. When I was in training, Google had just come out, and I know the older doctors were frustrated because patients would come in with Dr. Google papers and say, hey, yeah, Google said this, and this is what I need. I know some doctors are very territorial in the sense, and they feel like, hey, I went to med school, this thing didn't, you need to trust me over that, and don't explain. I've taken the opposite approach in that I'm encouraging patients the following way. I'm saying, okay, use ChatGPT, but use it carefully. It hallucinates, so don't take it to heart. It sounds like a professional. You can tell it to sound like a doctor, and it will sound like a doctor, but it hallucinates. And because of that, even if it's a 1% chance, I'm telling patients, make sure that if you use it, before you actually act on it, you ask a professional that knows the space that can tell you this is correct or wrong for your safety. I know I'm personally worried about countries that are outside the United States that possibly can get medication. So ChatGPT can diagnose you. You can go to the pharmacy, get the medicine, and then unfortunately, what if it's wrong and you have a bad side effect or it kills you? You know, you're basically self-subscribing, prescribing rather.
Yeah.
And so to your point, I say the following. I think 2 things. One, we should ask ChatGPT, especially like with your family practice visit or your regular doctor visits, hey, I have diabetes, I have hypertension, I know we're going to go over my drugs, I know this is going on, what kind of questions should I ask? So this way, when I go to the doctor, I have a great list of questions to ask. Not this, hey, how's your day going? No, like it's like, hey, explain this diabetic thing to me and why I need to take this in the morning, not at night, or just very specific. Then I take it to the next level. Take your smartphone or take a laptop, where you literally, as you're talking to a doctor, I know some doctors will hate this, but you put it in there and you ask ChatGPT, hey, doctor mentioned this disease to me. I don't know what it is. Explain it to me. And then you, together with the doctor, you're conversing, you're working, you're doing together. That way, ChatGPT does a really good job explaining, and then the doctor can review it and say, yeah, this is right. No, this part is wrong. And now we're teaching patients. I don't have my sunglasses in front of me, but the next thing I want to do is have VR on glasses, and then I give it to the patient, and then together we're able to really see their disease process, look at their diabetes, look at their heart, why they need to take their medicine, why they shouldn't do X, Y, and Z, because now that's healthcare. The last thing came out earlier, and I forgot to mention it. This iPhone, this one that I have, but the new one, the iPhone 15, has large language model. Now, granted, it's a small one. It has 34 million parameters, but basically the new iOS for Macs and this thing have information where it, for now, it can do a better autocomplete. But what if this thing had 10 times more memory with the same amount of size? Now, what if I said to you, we can put CPR on this thing, and regardless if you have the internet or not, this thing can walk you through CPR. Guess what? Now I'm saving lives. Someone I find in the middle of the street passed out, I don't know how to do CPR. I can turn this on and the camera can show me how to do it. Someone can hold my phone and show me, or this thing can talk to me through it. And so my point is, healthcare is going to change, humongous. It's like another level. And so I think technology, I think the big large language models are going to get smaller and smaller to fit on our phone. I think all these things are going to help patients. And so on the patient side, I'm for you. I think it's going to be great, but I want to make sure that they understand that this thing hallucinates and that there is danger.
I fully agree. But I would envision on top of that, of course, large language models and that kind of technology on your phone. I would also assume that if you have a camera on it, you could have a look at the pupils and have it analyzed and say, oh, is this a seizure and not a cardiac arrest or whatever. So you need to do something different. But having said that, I would imagine that if you have, of course, ChatGPT, it's all about prompting, right? So how do you ask the question and what information do you give it in what context? I would imagine from medical universities and doctors alike, with all the research that's being done, why shouldn't the doctors or the medical field worldwide curate or have a curation layer on top of any, it doesn't matter which LLM, an LLM, to make sure the patient gets to ask the right questions based on their data? Because it would save the doctor time. The patient comes in. You shouldn't be afraid of it, and should be happy that the patient does it, because science or research has proven that patients or people are much more lenient to give information to a bot, more information to a bot, more truthful information to a bot, I should say, than to a person. Let's say, as a doctor, you ask someone, some CEO, did you use any drugs? We know in some fields, cocaine use is really high, right? But if his wife is next to him, he's not going to admit that he uses cocaine every week, right? But if there's a problem, like a cardiac problem, and we know cocaine has an influence on that, you would give it a total different treatment, and it might even come out of his blood. What if it's as a triage process beforehand? He starts researching, and this bot starts asking him questions. I think you would get truthful answers. He would say, "Yeah, well, now and then I use cocaine." Okay, now we understand. We need to look at it. Well, the bot or the technology will understand. We need to approach this differently. So, what if every patient, because they inherently want it, use a curated system that is curated by medical professionals, and basically it's triage combined with, I need to understand what I have, if I have something, and that would help. Would something like that be helpful? And is that realistic to think that you have like an international triage bot? Because I would imagine if you have the best universities, medical universities in the world, they could develop that together and put it out there for free for everybody to use.
Yeah.
It should be like a
So
World Health Organization initiative or something. I don't know.
yeah. So two sides to that. We mentioned earlier, why not create our own local data to help our own population, and that would be one way. Your approach would be good, but at the same time, you would have to do something like we said earlier, federated learning, so that you're still taking advantage of everybody's knowledge, but then you're only using the data for that local area and helping that local area even more. Um, I've always said we need to have doctors do the reinforced learning, not like there's some history that says supposedly that ChatGPT paid under $1 and had people in Africa do reinforced learning for their models. So every time ChatGPT would say something, a human being out in Africa would look at it and say, "Yeah, that looks good" or not. But my thing is, they're not doctors, or at least the population they mention aren't doctors. And here's the other thing: they may not be the right doctor, meaning if I'm reinforced learning for ER, I'm an ER doctor. I should reinforce. But if there's output that says about surgery, I'm not a surgeon. I can do reinforced learning, but I'm not the right doctor because I'm not a surgeon. I may actually do harm to the algorithm. And so to your point, I would love to see a free model. I see the following happening: there's a huge cry in healthcare. I see different professions stepping up and saying, you know what, we're going to create an algorithm just for ER and we're going to put it here. And I think there's going to be a movement where different parts of the world are not going to look at ChatGPT, but they're going to make their own models. And to your point of triage, I could see a world where, as an ER doctor, there's this thing called WikiEM, which is like Wikipedia for ER. And they did a really good job. They took all the data and they have it open source for anybody to use. And some of my colleagues, that's what they use as their reference. And so my point is, why not do that again? Like you said, have the World Health Organization create something like this, and then divide the data algorithm up into different sectors around the world, and then that would be one way. I'm with you. My heart is for patients. I just want to make sure no one gets hurt. And then the thing we haven't really talked about much that I want to reinforce is if there's any healthcare providers out there, professionals out there, we need to make sure that they understand this technology. Like we started the show, some people say, hey, this is our solution to everything. This makes no mistakes. No, we need to know the good and the bad, and sometimes this things does things that we don't know. OpenAI itself, they will come out and say, hey, some of the things this is producing, we don't know how it's doing it. We didn't predict that it would be able to do it, and it's doing it now. The last thing I want to mention is there's this thing by Google called Gemini. That is going to be huge coming up here. And when they release that, I personally think this is going to be between 10 and 20 times stronger than ChatGPT. So I can't wait to see what next year holds for this technology.
And Gemini specifically for the medical field or a general?
Yeah. Just general, but then specific to the medical field, they have this thing called MedPalm 2 that they're using
Okay.
the back engine of Gemini, but then you use their data set for medical and then you put it together. And so the way I see it is if you have a 10, 20 times stronger engine and then you're using the specific section of medical and then using that at the back engine, you're going to start getting some amazing results because it's been trained in medical data. So I personally can't wait. So if someone out there has access to this and wants to give me access, I'd love to play with it.
Well, that would be cool. And if you look at the near future, let's say the coming 2 years, do you envision that this small device we have as a consumer, right? We all have our phones that we're going to be using one or the other generative AI solution to diagnose ourselves or triage ourselves and go to the doctor or even send it to the doctor. Do you think that's going to happen within the next 2 years, 3 years, maybe?
Yeah, I see it this way. For better or worse, this thing is, genie's out. It's out there.
Well, yeah,
People are using
unstoppable.
it. People listening to this class are like, oh, I didn't realize I could do that. Let me jump on and do it. As a profession, we need to help our patients and make sure that they're safe. So I'm encouraging every healthcare provider to really explain the good, the bad, and the ugly, everybody, to everybody, because it's going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, there'll be a black market for it, and there'll be ways around it, and there'll be some VPNs out there, and there'll be ways that people can still get this data. And it's going to happen, even if your doctor says don't do it. So why not educate them? Why not facilitate the process? And let's create an algorithm that I've always said, let's create a company where information comes in, ChatGPT gives out the information or some kind of GPT. The patient looks at it, but in conjunction with the doctor, and the doctor is looking at it and giving the blessing. And then let's move forward. That way they can still use it, but then they have a professional on the back end making sure that this is correct for your care.
But that would mean if you do that for a couple of years, and in most cases have come by, then after that time, you don't need that doctor anymore for that part. You need it for
Yeah.
other parts, but it because it's so well trained or verified that it knows what to do and how to
Yeah.
come to the right conclusion, right?
That would be the goal. Um, the problem with that is there's something called data drift. And so today that information works and it's reinforced and it's teaching, but then the population or the disease change or something happens. And so now you have to redirect, rechange the data and then change it. So in a box that nothing changes, that would work. But moving forward, for example, COVID, they came up with a vaccine. They're like, ooh, this one may not work as well. We made it only for these strains. Same thing with your disease process. It changes, and the algorithm needs to change with it. And it's not there yet where it trains itself, but in the future, I could see that the algorithm training itself. It's still going to need a human to look at it and say, yeah, this is correct still.
And what does that mean for training doctors for the education system? Because you need a total overhaul if you start doing this. Because doctors, their role changes, and you ask different stuff from the doctor.
Yeah. I love school. I have multiple degrees. I just love school. I'm jealous. I think the future is positive in that, you know, for example, you mentioned it earlier. I could create my own clinical cases. I can use ChatGPT to interpret some. I literally just did a podcast on this yesterday, and we can use EKGs uploaded, and it'll walk me through the EKGs. I could put some weird rash that I have and take a picture and upload it, and it will give me what's called a differential diagnosis, all the possibilities. And so, how amazing as a student, I went through tons and tons of books to just look for pattern recognition, and case studies. What if the AI could just do it for me and then just give me all these information? So, if I'm doing different parts, so if I'm in trauma, it would give me all the trauma cases. I'm now doing emergency room, it would give me all the emergency room cases, and then just repetition. I personally am jealous because there's some information that I know it took me a while to memorize, but now I literally can talk to AI, take the transcript. I've actually cloned my voice, and we can talk about that later. But then I can get in the car, and then now it can go through that lesson and give me the speech. So I'm thinking, wow, there's so many ways. And if I'm a visual person, I can take that concept, put it into Dolly, and say, hey, give me a picture of this concept, and it'll give me a picture. It's unbelievable. So I think it's going to change, and we need to change the way we teach, and we need to make sure we tell our professors to use this technology. And to my son's case, he's going to start using this technology. So for better or worse, we need to teach our students how to use it correctly.
I know, but then we have a lot of professors and teachers, and I think it's not any different in the US, that are, I wouldn't say old school, but they were schooled in the old way. So how do we understand for new students, you can change the way you approach this, right? But there's a whole existing base of doctors and teachers or professors that do it, that have their old ways. How do we get them on board?
You know, I always say in life, ironically, we're talking about education, but my solution is education. We need to teach our educators this technology, and we need to explain it. We need, there's early adopters, so we need to teach them. There's middle adopters that are waiting to see, and we need to teach them. And then there's those late adopters that's just going to learn from the first two groups. And to this point is we really need to have the educational system have a conference and literally all of them speak and talk, because the way we're teaching is so antiquated. I'm personally biased. I felt like college was fun, but to me it was a waste. I wish I was in Europe where I could have gone straight to med school and get more done. And then with med school again, I feel like some of it, not that it was a waste of time, but I feel like I could have been more efficient. Like if I had AI today, I really think I'd be a much better doctor after 4 years. Not that I'm a bad one, just that the amount of information that I can gain and grow, it'd be so much quicker.
Let me guess. If you had generative AI at your fingers or at hand when studying, you would have used it to train you for your exams, right? To
Yeah.
keep asking you questions about the stuff you had to learn, present your pictures, blah, blah, blah. So create continuous testing or something. I would imagine you would
Hmm.
do that.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, I honestly think I would probably score better on my exams. Not that I did bad. I did really well, but I think I would have just aced them even more. Because it's all about pattern recognition in medicine and learning how to think. And then just seeing these clinical cases and understanding it, it really helps me understand the pathophysiology and the way of thinking. You know, before technology, before this, and you go back 100 years or more, 200 years, the way medicine was taught is you would have a mentor. You would
Yeah.
literally hang out with another doctor, and that doctor would teach you. Now, that doctor, to me, in the future, is going to be AI. That's going to have, now, let me preface, it's not going to be ChatGPT, but it's going to be an AI that has been trained just with medical data, doctors that have reinforced this data, and it's going to be an algorithm really, really strong. And for the basics for a doctor to start coming up the ranks, it's going to be very good to learn. And I bet you could learn it way quicker than 4 years of med school. You could learn it faster.
That's an interesting thought because basically you're putting these very expensive business schools or med schools in the US. Most of it is privatized. In Europe, it's all government or semi-government. You're putting them out of business
Yeah.
because the AI eventually is going to be much better than any professor because it's faster and it can remember more.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm going blank. The average human being reads about 700 books in a lifetime, and these models have been trained, I forget, something ridiculous, like 100,000 books or something. I'm quoting it probably low. It's probably more than that. So just to give you a difference of, what a human being can take in a lifetime and what this thing can learn.
Yeah, and the difference is of those 700 books, we can't remember all of it. AI does.
Yeah.
So if we know this, right? Um, I just realized you need a different breed of doctors. You need different
Yeah.
people. It's a different mentality.
Yeah.
I think you're probably a unique breed because you've taken you've been in medicine for a long time. You understand it. First of all, you understand the need. It needs to change. You look ahead and say, okay, we have an aging population, e.g., nurses, doctors, that needs to change. But hey, we don't have enough youngsters to do that, and we have an aging population. Hey, we have a problem or a potential problem. And there's something in between called AI that could help us. Um,
Yeah.
and having said that, what kind of doctors do you see? Uh, I have no idea, but I'm trying to imagine
Yeah.
what kind of people are they?
Yeah, I feel like and I'm running short on time here, so I'm gonna be
That's okay.
brief on this answer, but I feel the following. I feel like we need a happy middle. Older doctors, I'm gonna generalize here. I'm not just preferencing that. So older doctors in general have a hard time with technology. I'm saying some of them can't type, some of them don't want to do this, some of them just feel threatened. Then you have people in the early stage adopters that we just talked about, like, hey, they're ready to use ChatGPT and they don't really get it. And so my point is this: we need that happy middle, someone that's kind of me in the middle of those two ages, where I understand the future and I understand the older population and why they're resistant, but then I also understand what the younger population is doing. So, and then you combine both and you're creating something big.
That sounds like a logical. So we need to copy your DNA and clone you, Harvey.
Well, I appreciate you having me. I really do. Thank you so much. And I look forward to doing this again soon.
Thank you very much, and let's keep updating and see what new comes up and what we can do with that and bring that to the community. Thank you very
Awesome.
much.
Thank you so much.